He ripped the photo in half. Right there at the diner table. Emily's photo, the one he'd carried in his wallet for 5 years. The one Lily had kissed goodnight more times than he could count. He tore it straight down the middle, set both pieces on the table, and didn't look away. His date was already gone. Coat purse excuses, all of it vanished into the Christmas Eve rain the second she heard the word widower. The waitress saw it happen, didn't say a word, just refilled his coffee and walked away. Ryan Cole stared at the two halves of his dead wife's face and thought, "This is the last time I let anyone make me feel like loving her was something to apologize for." That was the moment everything changed. Not because of what he decided, because of who was watching. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story reaches. And if it hits you somewhere, real subscribe. What happens next will stay with you. The ring was back in his jacket pocket before the door finished closing behind her. Ryan Cole didn't watch her go. He'd learned a long time ago that watching people leave only made it worse. Instead, he turned back to his coffee black, no sugar barely touched, and stared at the surface like it owed him an answer. The diner smelled like cinnamon and burnt toast. Somebody had strung Christmas lights along the front window, and they blinked unevenly, the way lights do when one bulb is almost dead but hasn't given up yet. Outside, the rain came down in sheets, the kind of cold December rain that couldn't decide if it wanted to be sleet. Cars hissed past on the wet asphalt. A family hurried by under a single umbrella, the father holding it over his wife and 2 kids getting completely soaked himself laughing about it. Ryan looked away. He picked up the coffee cup, put it down without drinking, picked it up again. 3 dates in 3 months. 3 women. 3 versions of the same conversation. It always started the same way. They'd meet somewhere public, a coffee shop, a restaurant, once a bookstore his colleague had recommended. Things would go well enough. The woman would laugh at something he said. He'd feel for maybe 20 minutes like a normal human being. Like a man who existed outside of deployment schedules and school pickup times and the particular silence that lived in his apartment after Lily went to sleep. And then it would come out. It always came out. "Do you have kids?" "Yeah, a daughter. She's 8. "Oh, that's sweet. Her mom..." She passed 5 years ago. And then not always right away, but always eventually the shift. The almost imperceptible change in the woman's expression. The way her shoulders would adjust. The way her eyes would calculate something he couldn't see. Tonight, it had moved faster than usual. His date's name was Sandra. She was a paralegal, 34, recently relocated from Boston, recommended by a buddy from his unit who meant well. She was perfectly pleasant, perfectly fine. And the moment Ryan mentioned Lily, not even all of it, not the full weight of it. Just, "I have a daughter. She's 8. She's the reason I schedule everything around school holidays." Sandra had smiled with her mouth and gone somewhere else entirely with her eyes. She'd lasted 45 more minutes, ordered a salad, ate half of it, checked her phone twice. Then, "I'm so sorry I forgot. I promised my sister I'd call tonight. It's a family thing. But this was really nice, Ryan. Really." He'd nodded. He'd thanked her for coming out in the rain. He'd meant it. And after she left, he'd sat back down, ordered another coffee he didn't want, and taken out the ring. Not a new ring. He hadn't bought it for Sandra, God no. He'd only known the woman 3 weeks. It was Emily's ring. His wife's engagement ring, the one he'd bought on a Navy salary when he was 24 years old, and stupid enough to think he could give a woman everything she deserved. He carried it sometimes. He wasn't sure why. Habit, maybe, or punishment. Or just because it was the last physical proof that there had been a time when someone had chosen him without hesitation, without calculation, without a quiet exit strategy waiting in the wings. He'd set it on the table and stared at it until the cold of the diner made his hands stiff. Then he'd put it back in his pocket. That's it, he thought. That's the last one. Not out of bitterness. He wasn't a bitter man. The Navy had cured him of self-pity years ago. You didn't get to feel sorry for yourself when there were real problems in the world, real danger, real men and women depending on the person beside them. But there was a difference between self-pity and clarity. And Ryan Cole, sitting in a blinking Christmas light diner on December 24th, had finally achieved something close to clarity. He was a package deal. He'd always known that, but knowing it and feeling it were different things. Feeling it meant understanding bone deep that whoever chose him was also choosing Lily's school plays and Lily's nightmares and Lily's habit of leaving cereal bowls on the bathroom counter for reasons no human being could explain. Whoever chose him was choosing grief that didn't fully go away. It just relocated, settled into the corners of a life, showed up at inconvenient moments, like a guest who never quite finished leaving. And most people, when they really understood that, made the sensible choice. They left. He was ordering the check when someone sat down across from him. Not nearby. Not at the next table. Directly across. In the seat Sandra had vacated not 20 minutes earlier, before her coat had even fully dried. Ryan looked up. She was maybe 28, 29. Dark hair soaked through from the rain plastered against her jacket in a way she'd apparently decided not to be bothered by. She was carrying a camera bag over one shoulder. A real one. Professional, battered in the way equipment gets when it's actually used. Her eyes were an unusual shade somewhere between green and gray, and they were looking at him with an expression he couldn't immediately classify. Not pity, not curiosity exactly. Something more direct than either of those. "You look like a man who's forgotten he's worth loving," she said. Ryan stared at her. "I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be weird," she said, already unwrapping a scarf from around her neck. "I've been sitting at the counter for the last hour, waiting for the rain to let up, and I watched your date leave, and then I watched you take something out of your pocket and stare at it for 10 minutes, and then put it back, and then sit there looking like a man who's made a decision he hasn't quite committed to yet. And I don't know. It seemed wrong to let that go without saying something." Ryan considered about 4 different responses and discarded all of them. "That's a lot of observing," he finally said. "Occupational hazard." She gestured at the camera bag. "Photographer. I notice things." "You always sit down with strangers in diners. Only when they look like they're about to do something irreversible." She tilted her head slightly. "Are you about to do something irreversible?" He almost laughed. It surprised him enough that the almost laugh made it all the way to his face before he caught it. "I was about to pay my check and go home," he said, "and make a decision about something." He looked at her for a long moment. The Christmas lights blinked. The rain drummed against the window. "I have a daughter," he said. He had no idea why he said it. He never led with that. 8 years old. Her mother died 5 years ago. I'm Navy Chief Petty Officer, 13 years of service, deployments, the whole thing. The woman who just left found out about all of that and left. He paused. I was sitting here deciding whether it was worth trying again. Deciding whether a man like me is realistically something a woman would choose. He expected her to shift, to adjust her shoulders, to find a way to signal politely that she'd misread the situation, and this wasn't the conversation she'd intended to start. Instead, she leaned forward slightly and said, "That's a terrible way to frame the question." "What do you mean? You're asking whether you're worth choosing. As if you're the variable. As if there's something about you that needs to be corrected before you qualify for love." She shook her head. "That's not the right question." "What's the right question?" "Whether you're choosing the right people." She sat back. "Those are different things." Ryan looked at her. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't catch your name." "Claire," she said. "Claire Bennett." "Ryan Cole." She nodded like she was filing that away. "How old is she?" "Your daughter." 8. Her name's Lily." Something moved across Claire's face. Not calculation. The opposite, actually. "Does she know you're out here trying to do this?" "She thinks I'm at dinner with a friend." "Smart kid?" "Terrifyingly." "So she probably knows." Ryan was quiet for a second. "Yeah," he admitted. "She probably knows." Claire was quiet too. Outside, the rain softened slightly, the drumming against the window shifting to something gentler. The diner was getting quieter as the night wore on. The counter crowd thinning, the booths emptying one by one. "Can I ask you something?" Ryan said. "You can try." "Why did you actually sit down?" She considered that. He could see her considering it. She was the kind of person who thought before she spoke, which was its own rarity. "Because I recognized something," she finally said. "That expression. The one you had when your date left. I know what it looks like when someone decides they're not worth the effort. And I know how quickly that decision calcifies if nobody pushes back." She looked at him steadily. "I've made that decision about myself before. I didn't want to watch someone else make it and do nothing." Ryan didn't say anything for a moment. "You're very direct," he said. "You're very guarded," she replied. "Not an accusation, just an observation." "Occupational hazard," he said, echoing her. She smiled at that. It was the first time she'd smiled, and it changed her face entirely, not softer exactly, but warmer, like the difference between a door being locked and a door being closed. "So," she said, "terrible coffee and an existential crisis. How do you want to spend the rest of Christmas Eve?" And against every instinct, he'd spent 5 years building, Ryan Cole flagged down the waitress and ordered 2 more cups. They talked for 2 hours. He couldn't have explained afterward exactly what they talked about. It was the kind of conversation that sprawled, that doubled back on itself, that moved from one thing to another without any clear logic, except that both of them kept finding reasons to keep going. She told him about photography, not the glamorous version people imagined, but the real version. The years of shooting weddings for grocery money while building a portfolio. The way light worked differently in winter. The specific loneliness of standing on the outside of moments and capturing them for other people. He told her about the Navy. The real version of that too, not the recruitment poster version, but the version where you were exhausted in ways that didn't show on your face, where you missed things that couldn't be made up afterward, where you learned to be reliable, because the alternative was consequences you couldn't afford. He told her about Emily. Not everything, but enough. She was funny, he said. That's what people don't always say about someone they've lost. They say kind or beautiful or strong. Emily was all of those things, but mostly she was funny. She could make me laugh in the middle of an argument. It's a terrible superpower to put in someone's hands. Claire smiled. How'd she go? Cardiac arrhythmia. She was 26. No history, no warning. She went to sleep one night and didn't wake up. He said it the way he'd learned to say it, steadily, because the alternative was a crack that once started didn't stop. Lily was 3. She doesn't remember much. Sometimes she asks me what her mom's laugh sounded like, and I try to describe it. He stopped. You can't describe a laugh. Not really. You can try, but it's not the same as the sound. Claire was looking at him very quietly. No, she agreed. It's not. You've lost someone. My dad, 4 years ago. She turned her coffee cup in her hands. He was the person who taught me photography. He gave me my first camera when I was 9, a beaten-up old Nikon that probably cost him 2 weeks of grocery money. She paused. After he died, I couldn't pick up a camera for almost a year. It felt like using it was a betrayal somehow. Like it was his thing and I was trespassing. What changed? I realized the opposite was true, she said. That not using it was the betrayal. That the camera was the thing he'd given me to keep, not to put away. Ryan looked at her across the table. That's a good way to think about things, he said. I'm working on it, she said. Some days more successfully than others. When the diner finally started making pointed gestures toward closing, wiping down counters, turning off the coffee machine, Ryan looked at his watch and was genuinely startled by the time. I need to get back, he said. My neighbor's watching Lily. Claire nodded, already pulling on her jacket. Outside, the rain had stopped. The street was quiet and wet, the Christmas lights from the diner reflected in the puddles on the sidewalk. The air was cold enough that their breath showed. I don't normally do this, Ryan said. I want you to know that. This wasn't, I didn't come here looking for this. I know, she said. Me neither. Can I have your number? She looked at him for a moment with those gray-green eyes. Under one condition, she said. What's that? You stop asking whether you're worth choosing. You start asking better questions. He held out his phone. She typed in her number. He looked at it for a moment, then looked at her. Merry Christmas, Claire Bennett. Merry Christmas, Ryan Cole. She turned and walked down the wet street camera bag over her shoulder scarf, trailing slightly in the wind. Ryan stood on the sidewalk for a long moment. Then he put his phone in his pocket next to the ring. And for the first time in 5 years, both of those things felt like they belonged there. He didn't text her that night. He didn't want to be the man who texted at midnight on Christmas Eve like someone drowning and reaching for whatever was closest. He had more dignity than that. Or at least he was committed to pretending he did. He got home at 11:45. Mrs. Patterson from next door was asleep in the armchair with a TV on which she always denied, but which Ryan had photographic evidence of at this point. He paid her, walked her to her door, came back. Lily's door was slightly open the way she liked it. He stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the sound of her breathing, that specific, deep, completely trusting sound of a child who believed the world was safe enough to sleep in. He'd spent 5 years trying to be the reason that was still true. He went in, pulled her blanket up an inch or two, touched her hair without waking her. She looked like Emily. She always looked like Emily. He went to bed. Stared at the ceiling for a while. Thought about a woman with a soaked scarf and a battered camera bag who'd sat down across from him without asking permission. You stop asking whether you're worth choosing. You start asking better questions. He picked up his phone, looked at her name in his contacts, put the phone down, picked it up again, typed Merry Christmas. I'm asking better questions. He stared at it for 30 seconds, then sent it before he could change his mind. He put the phone on the nightstand, lay back, closed his eyes. His phone lit up. One message. Good. Don't stop. Ryan Cole, Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy. A man who had navigated hostile waters and come out the other side lay in the dark on Christmas Eve and felt something shift in his chest. Not fireworks, not lightning. Something quieter than that. Something that felt cautiously and terrifyingly like the first inch of a door being opened. He had no idea what was on the other side. But for the first time in 5 years, he didn't immediately reach to close it. The text sat in his phone for 3 days before he did anything about it. Good. Don't stop. 3 words. He'd read them probably 40 times. Not obsessively, or maybe obsessively, he wasn't sure anymore what the baseline for normal behavior looked like when it came to this particular subject. He just kept coming back to it the way you keep touching a bruise. Not because it hurts. Because the fact that it hurts means something is still alive there. On the morning of December 28th, Lily found him standing at the kitchen counter, staring at his phone with a cup of coffee going cold in his other hand. Dad? You've been standing there for like 10 minutes. I'm thinking. About what? He set the phone face down on the counter. Nothing important. Lily was 8 years old and had inherited exactly none of Ryan's ability to let things go. She looked at the phone, looked at him and said, Is it about the woman from Christmas Eve? Ryan turned around slowly. What woman? Mrs. Patterson told me you came home late. She said you seemed different. Lily climbed onto the bar stool and propped her chin on her hands with the focused energy of a prosecutor. Different how I asked. She said lighter, like something got put down. Ryan stared at his daughter. Mrs. Patterson needs to mind her business, he said. Mrs. Patterson is 73 and her show doesn't come on until noon. She has nothing but business to mind. Lily tilted her head. Was she nice? Nobody said there was a she. Dad, come on. He picked up his coffee, put it down. Looked at his daughter, this small, relentless, terrifyingly perceptive human being that he and Emily had somehow made, and said, She was different. That's all I know right now. Lily nodded like that was sufficient. Different good or different complicated? Probably both. Those are usually the same thing, Lily said and slid off the bar stool and went back to her cereal like she hadn't just said something that belonged on the wall of a philosophy classroom. Ryan picked up his phone. Typed, I owe you a real conversation. Are you free this week? The reply came in under 4 minutes. Thursday. You pick the place. Somewhere with better coffee this time. He smiled at his phone like an idiot. Then he put it away before Lily could see. He picked a small Italian place on Clement Street that a guy in his unit had recommended for a second date, then stopped himself because this wasn't a date, Or at least he wasn't calling it that, which was probably its own kind of answer. Claire was already there when he arrived, sitting at a corner table with her camera bag on the chair beside her and a glass of water in front of her. She looked up when he walked in, and there was no performance in it, no tucking of hair, no adjustment of posture. Just recognition. Like she'd been waiting for someone she actually expected to show up. "You're 3 minutes early," she said. "Navy habit." He sat down. "You're already here." "Photographer habit. I like to see who walks through the door." "What do you do with that, what you see?" "Mostly just file it away." She picked up her menu. Sometimes it matters later. The waiter came. They ordered. And then, without preamble, without the usual circling that Ryan had learned to expect from first real conversations, Claire put her menu down and said, "Tell me about Lily. Not tell me about your late wife, or tell me about the Navy, or any of the heavy freight topics that people usually led with when they were trying to understand him." She asked about Lily. And something about that specific question in that specific order loosened something in his chest that he hadn't realized was braced. So he told her. He told her about Lily's habit of leaving cereal bowls in places that made no logical sense. The bathroom counter. The top of the washing machine, once memorably on the back porch in November. He told her about the phase age 5 when Lily had decided her name was actually Princess Thunderstorm and refused to answer to anything else for 6 weeks. He told her about Lily's drawings, which were extraordinary in the way children's drawings sometimes are not technically, but emotionally with a directness that adults spent years learning to lose. He told her about the nightmares that came sometimes, still the ones where Lily woke up calling for Emily, and how Ryan had learned to just sit on the edge of the bed without speaking until she came back to herself, because words in those moments were too loud. Claire listened to all of it, not politely, actually. "She sounds like a whole person," Claire said. "She is, more of one than me some days." "Does she know what she lost with her mom?" "She knows the fact of it. The weight of it, I don't know. I think she feels it without having language for it yet. Like a sound that's too low to hear, but you can feel it in your chest." Claire was quiet for a moment. "My mom left when I was 6, she said. "Not the same, but I know something about that particular kind of absence, the one that shapes you before you can name it. She left, just left. Packed a bag on a Tuesday. I came home from school and she was gone. She said it without drama, the way you talk about something that happened long enough ago that the raw edge has been worn smooth. My dad raised me alone after that, which is probably why I—" She stopped. "Why you what?" She looked at him directly. "Why I sat down across from you in that diner. I recognize something. A man doing it alone and pretending it's enough." She paused. "It's enough for the kid. It's not enough for the man." Ryan didn't say anything for a moment. "You're doing it again," he said. "Doing what?" "Seeing things I didn't show you." "Is that a problem?" He thought about it. "No," he said. "It's just unfamiliar." She nodded. And they kept talking. And by the time they'd finished dinner and split a dessert, neither of them had planned on ordering. Ryan had told her more about his actual interior life than he'd told most people in 5 years. Not because she pushed, because she made space. And space, it turned out, was the thing he'd been running out of for a very long time. Outside on the sidewalk, he said, "I want to do this again." "Okay," she said. "And I want you to meet Lily." She looked at him. He could see her processing that the weight of what it meant, the specific seriousness of that invitation. "Ryan, I know what I'm asking. I know what it means when I ask it." He kept his voice steady. "I'm not asking you to be anything. I'm just asking you to meet her. Because I can't keep those two things separate and be honest with either one." Claire was quiet for a long moment. "Okay," she said again. But this time, it meant something different. She met Lily on a Saturday in January. Ryan had told Lily only that a friend was coming to lunch. He'd told Claire only that Lily already knew more than she was supposed to. He spent the morning mildly terrified in the way that combat-experienced Navy servicemen are not supposed to be terrified by their 8-year-old daughters. Lily was standing at the living room window when Claire knocked. Ryan opened the door. Claire stepped in, and Lily turned around. And there was a pause, the specific pause of two people taking each other in without any of the usual social scaffolding. And then Lily said, "Your camera bag is really cool. Is it heavy?" Claire looked down at the bag on her shoulder, looked at Lily, said, "You want to see what's inside?" Lily was across the room in 4 steps. Ryan watched his daughter and this woman sit down on the living room floor, the camera bag open between them. Claire pulling out lenses and explaining in a completely unsimplified way what each one was for. She didn't do the voice adults sometimes do with children, the slightly elevated, slightly slowed down voice that signals I am now communicating with a smaller person. She just talked, like Lily was someone worth talking to, like her questions were real questions that deserved real answers. Lily, who had inherited Ryan's ability to detect condescension from approximately 40 yards, relaxed completely within 10 minutes. By lunch, she was asking Claire if she'd ever photographed anything dangerous. "Define dangerous," Claire said. "Like explosions, or animals." "I photographed a protest that got out of hand once. Does that count?" Lily considered. "What happened?" "Tear gas. Very bad for cameras. Worse for people." Claire tilted her head. "I got the shot, though." Lily pointed at Claire with her fork. "I like her," she announced to Ryan, apparently having forgotten he was there. Ryan looked at Claire. Claire was already looking at him. After that, things moved in the way that real things move, not in grand gestures, but in accumulation. Small moments stacking on top of each other until the stack becomes a structure. Claire started showing up on Saturday mornings. Not every Saturday, she had her own work, her own life, a freelance career that required her to be places at odd hours with all of her focus. But enough Saturdays. Enough that Lily started factoring her in, started leaving space in plans, started saying we should ask Claire with the casual ease of someone incorporating a person into the architecture of their routine. They went to the De Young Museum because Claire wanted to show Lily the photography exhibit, and Lily wanted to press every interactive button in the building. Both things happened. Nobody died. Ryan bought them both coffee hot chocolate for Lily, actual coffee for Claire, and stood back and watched them argue cheerfully about which photograph in the entire exhibit was the best one, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt like a man in the middle of something good, rather than a man bracing for it to end. They made pancakes one Sunday and Lily added too much vanilla and they came out smelling incredible and tasting like a confusing dream. And Claire ate 3 of them anyway with complete sincerity and told Lily they were the most interesting pancakes she'd ever encountered, which was both technically true and kind in a way that cost something. Ryan watched that too. He was watching everything those days, cataloging it without meaning to. The way you handle something valuable carefully, with full attention, aware that it matters. He drove Lily to school twice when Claire happened to be at the apartment early. And both times Lily held Claire's hand through the parking lot, with the uncomplicated ease of a child who hadn't decided yet to be afraid of this. Ryan walked on Lily's other side, and didn't say anything about it, because there was nothing to say that the 3 of them walking together didn't already say more clearly. He didn't tell Claire he was falling in love with her. Not yet. It was too large a thing and the timing wasn't right. And there was still a part of him, smaller now but present, that was waiting for the moment when she'd adjust her shoulders and find a way out. He'd spent 5 years watching people calculate the cost of his life and find it too high. That habit of watching didn't disappear overnight just because the thing you were watching for stopped being what you saw. But he was watching for it less. That was something. Claire had her own version of that fear, though Ryan didn't fully understand it yet. She told him about it on a Wednesday night in March, after Lily was asleep sitting on his couch with a glass of wine and her feet tucked under her. They'd been talking about her work, a commission she'd just landed, corporate stuff. Not what she'd come up for, but it paid. And then the conversation had drifted the way their conversations did, and somewhere in the drift she'd set down her glass and said quietly, "Can I tell you something that makes me sound like a worse person than I am?" "You're not a worse person than you are," Ryan said. "Let me finish, then decide." She looked at her hands. "Some mornings I wake up and I think about Lily and the way she looks at me when I walk through the door, and I feel this thing. This big, warm, terrifying thing. And then immediately after that, I feel afraid. Of what? Of needing this. Of all of you. She said it quietly, but she said it straight. I'm 30 years old. I built my whole life around being someone who doesn't need, who can pick up and move and figure it out and not require anyone. Because the last time I required someone, she left on a Tuesday and took every assumption I'd ever made with her. She looked up at him. And now I'm sitting here 3 nights a week in your apartment, and your daughter holds my hand in parking lots, and I love it. I love all of it, and I don't know what to do with how scared that makes me. Ryan was quiet for a long moment. I know, he said. You know what? I know you're scared. I've known for a while. You're very good at looking like you're not, but you check the exits, in every room. I do it too. Different reason, same habit. He turned toward her. I'm scared too. Every single day. I'm scared that I'm going to love someone and lose them because I already know exactly what that costs, and I know I don't have the same reserves I had before to absorb it. And I'm scared that Lily's going to attach herself completely to you, and then something's going to happen, and I'm going to have to watch my daughter lose another person who... He stopped. The room was very quiet. Another person who... What? Claire asked. He looked at her. Another person who feels like home, he said. Claire didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she uncurled herself from the couch and moved closer to him, not dramatically, just closing the physical distance between them, and put her head against his shoulder. I'm not leaving on a Tuesday, she said. I know. I mean it. I know you mean it. He put his arm around her. I'm working on believing it. That's all I'm asking, she said. Just keep working on it. They sat like that for a while, not talking, the apartment quiet, except for the sound of the city outside, and the specific deep silence of Lily asleep down the hall. It wasn't a perfect moment. It was something better than perfect. It was 2 people, each carrying their own old damage, choosing not to put it down and walk away, choosing instead to carry it together for a while, and see how far they could get. Spring came and went without incident, which Ryan had learned to treat as its own kind of miracle. In his experience, good things didn't coast. They moved forward, or they moved backward, and the forward motion required constant quiet work, the kind that didn't look like anything from the outside, but cost everything from the inside. He and Claire had been doing that work. He knew it. She knew it. And for a few months, the work was paying off in a way that felt almost sustainable. Almost. The first crack came on a Thursday in April, and it came from a direction Ryan hadn't been watching. Lily came home from school and didn't say anything. That was the tell. Lily always said something about her day, about something that happened at lunch, about a fact she'd learned that she needed to relay immediately, like it was breaking news. She was a talker in the way that only children with rich interior lives are talkers, not filling silence, but actually transmitting. So when she walked through the door, dropped her backpack, and went directly to her room, without a word, Ryan felt it before he understood it. He gave her 20 minutes. Then he knocked. Lil. Nothing. I'm coming in. She was on her bed face down, which was the position she'd adopted for serious feelings since she was about 4 years old, when she'd figured out that a pillow muffled the kind of crying you didn't want anyone to hear. Ryan sat on the edge of the bed. He put his hand on her back and felt her breathing fast, shallow, the rhythm of someone who'd been holding it together for hours and was now only barely managing. Talk to me, he said. For a long moment, nothing. Then muffled by the pillow. Jason Mercer said, I don't have a real family. Ryan kept his hand still on her back. What did he mean by that? Lily turned her head just enough to breathe. He said a real family has a mom and a dad. He said I just have a dad, and Claire isn't my mom, so she doesn't count. And so basically, he said, basically, I'm alone. She stopped. Swallowed. He said it in front of everyone at lunch. The particular anger that moved through Ryan in that moment was one he'd learned to handle carefully. It was the kind that came from helplessness, not because he couldn't find Jason Mercer's parents and have an extremely direct conversation, but because he couldn't undo what had already been said, couldn't unplant the seed of it in his daughter's chest, couldn't rewind to before the words existed. Look at me, he said. Lily turned over slowly. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she had that specific look of a child who'd used up all her dignity, holding it together in public, and had nothing left. "Jason Mercer is wrong," Ryan said. "But we're not." She stopped, pulled at the edge of her sleeve. "We're not like other families, Dad." "No, we're not." "Doesn't that mean something's missing?" He looked at his daughter for a long moment. "It means something's different," he said. "Different and missing aren't the same thing." "But Mom, I know." He kept his voice steady, not because he felt steady, but because she needed one of them to be. "I know. And your mom, her not being here, is a real loss. I'm not going to tell you it isn't. But Lily, you have me. You have people who love you. You have Claire." He watched her face when he said it. "And Claire being here, that's not a gap filler. That's not a consolation prize. That's a person who chose to show up, every time. That means something." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Is Claire going to stay?" And there it was. The question beneath the question, the one she'd been carrying for months, the one Ryan had been hoping she wouldn't ask yet, because he didn't have an answer that was both honest and painless. "I think so," he said. "I hope so." "That's not a yes." "No," he admitted. "It's not." Lily looked at the ceiling. Then she said quietly, "Sometimes I wish she was my mom." "Like really?" She glanced at him, checking whether that was okay to say. "Is that bad? Because of Mom?" "No," Ryan said, and he meant it with everything he had. "That's not bad at all. That's you knowing what love feels like, and knowing you want it to stay. Your mom would understand that." He paused. "I promise you she would." Lily didn't say anything else. She just moved over slightly the way she'd been doing since she was 3 years old, and Ryan lay down next to her on the narrow bed, and they stayed like that until her breathing evened out and the tension went out of her shoulders. He stared at the ceiling and thought about what Lily had said. Is Claire going to stay? He didn't know how to guarantee that. He didn't know how to guarantee anything. But he knew that he was going to stop pretending the question wasn't there. He called Claire that night after Lily was asleep. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, everything okay?" Lily had a rough day. He told her what happened. All of it, including the last part, Lily's words, the ones that had sat in the room like something fragile. "Sometimes I wish you were my mom." There was a long silence on Claire's end. "Ryan, I'm not telling you that to put pressure on you," he said quickly. "I'm telling you because she said it, and it was real, and I don't believe in keeping real things from you. Not anymore." Another silence. When Claire spoke, her voice was careful, in a way he hadn't heard before. "What did you say to her?" "That you chose to show up. That means something." "Okay." A pause. "Okay." He could hear her breathing. "Ryan, I need to tell you something. And I need you to let me finish before you say anything." His stomach tightened. "All right. I got a call last week from the Renault Foundation. It's a photography residency program in Paris, 6 months. It's one of the most prestigious programs in the world for documentary photography. I applied 14 months ago and basically forgot about it because the acceptance rate is..." She stopped. "They want me. They called last Tuesday, and they want me to start in September." Ryan didn't say anything. "Ryan? I'm here. Say something. You should go," he said. And he meant it. He meant it completely, and it cost him everything to mean it. And he said it anyway because it was true, and because she'd worked for it, and because he was not going to be the reason Claire Bennett didn't get what she'd spent her life building toward. The silence that followed was different from the others. "That's it," she said. "Just you should go." "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to say what you actually feel." "I feel like you should go. It's a great opportunity. It's what you've worked for." "Ryan." Her voice shifted. "Stop doing that." "Doing what?" "Packing me up neatly and handing me off. You do this, you get ahead of the loss. You start processing the ending before it happens, so it hurts less when it comes." Her voice was tight. "I'm not leaving on a Tuesday. I told you that." "You'd be leaving in September. That's a specific date. That's more defined than a Tuesday." "That's not what I meant, and you know it." He stood up from the couch, walked to the window. The city outside was doing what it always did, carrying on indifferent, lit up and moving. "Claire, What do you want from me right now? You want me to ask you not to go? I'm not going to do that. I don't want you to ask me not to go. I want you to tell me you don't want me to. Of course I don't want you to. Lily doesn't want you to. But wanting and asking are the same thing, Ryan. They're the same thing. When you love someone, you're allowed to want them to stay. Saying it out loud isn't a demand. It's honest. The word love landed in the middle of the sentence, and neither of them acknowledged it directly, but it was there. It had been there for a while. This was the first time either of them had let it get that close to the surface. I love you, Ryan said. He said it before he decided to, which meant it came out real. I love you, and I don't want you to go, and I know you should go anyway, and I don't know how to hold both of those things at the same time without bracing. Silence. I love you too, Claire said. Which is exactly why this is so hard. Neither of them said anything for a moment. When do you have to decide? He asked. They want an answer by the end of the month. Okay. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass. Okay, we have time. Ryan. I'm not running, I promise. He closed his eyes. I just need a minute to not brace. Give me a minute. She gave him the minute. Okay, he said. Talk to me. Tell me about it. What would it actually look like? What would 6 months in Paris actually look like? And she did. She talked for 20 minutes and he listened, and somewhere in the middle of it, the conversation shifted from a collision to something more like a negotiation between two people who both wanted to find the answer. But the fault line had appeared. And fault lines, once visible, don't disappear. The following weeks had a specific quality to them. The quality of something beautiful that both people know is under pressure, which makes everything both more vivid and more fragile. They were more careful with each other, more deliberate, which was its own kind of warning sign. Ryan's deployment schedule compressed in May, a series of training exercises that kept him away from home 4 days a week, which meant Lily was leaning harder on Mrs. Patterson and the school's aftercare program, and the kind of logistical patchwork that single parents learn to construct and feel guilty about simultaneously. He was exhausted in a way that wasn't physical, exactly more like structural, like the load-bearing walls of him were being tested from too many directions at once. Claire was around when she could be. She picked Lily up twice when Ryan was stuck. She came for dinner on weekends. But something had shifted slightly since the Paris conversation, not in her behavior, which was steady, but in the atmosphere between them, which had acquired a new layer, a pending quality, like a question that both people are thinking about, and neither is ready to ask out loud. It was Lily who broke it open. On a Saturday in late May, Ryan came home from a week of exercises to find Claire and Lily in the kitchen, and Lily in tears. Not the contained, face-down-in-pillow tears of April, but the open, front-facing, you need to deal with this tears that meant something had cracked through to the surface. What happened? Ryan dropped his bag at the door. Claire looked at him from across the kitchen. Her expression said, I'll explain later. Right now she needs you. He went to Lily, crouched to her level. Lil, hey, what is it? Lily grabbed his arm. Claire told me about Paris. Ryan looked up at Claire. Claire said quietly, she asked me directly. I wasn't going to lie to her. He couldn't argue with that. He turned back to Lily. Okay. What did she tell you? That she might go away for 6 months. Lily's grip on his arm tightened. That's so long, Dad. That's almost a whole school year. She stopped, swallowed. First Mom. Then you go away all the time for the Navy. And now Claire might. Why does everyone always have to go? The question wasn't dramatic, it was just real. The honest question of a child who'd absorbed enough loss to start looking for the pattern in it. Ryan didn't have an answer that was going to fix it. Lily, Claire said. She'd come around the counter and was crouching down too, so she and Ryan were both at Lily's level, the three of them in a small circle. Can I tell you something? Lily looked at her wary and teary. Going somewhere isn't the same as leaving, Claire said. Your dad goes away for the Navy. Does that mean he's leaving you? That's different. He comes back. I would come back. You don't know that. You're right. I don't know anything for certain. Nobody does. Claire's voice was steady, but not detached. There was something in it that cost her, and Lily heard it. What I know is that right now I'm here, and I choose to be here, every time. She paused. Can that be enough for right now? Lily looked at her for a long moment. Then she looked at Ryan. Then she looked at Claire again, and said the thing that neither adult was ready for. Sometimes I wish you were my mom. Like really my mom. She said it directly this time, not quietly, not muffled, looking straight at Claire. And if you go to Paris, I'm scared you'll decide we're too complicated and not come back. The kitchen was completely silent. Claire's face did something complicated. Ryan watched it happen, watched the fear and the love and the history move across her expression in the space of a few seconds. Then she pulled Lily into a hug. Not carefully, fully. I am not going anywhere, she said into Lily's hair. You hear me? I don't know what the answer is about Paris yet, but I am not going anywhere from you. Lily held on tight. Ryan sat on the kitchen floor. He was not technically a man who cried easily. The Navy had opinions about that, and he'd internalized them more thoroughly than he cared to admit. But sitting on his kitchen floor, watching his daughter hold on to the woman he loved, he felt something move through him that didn't have another name. Not grief. Not exactly. Something closer to the specific ache of realizing that what you're afraid of losing is the exact thing that makes you most afraid. He loved them both, and he had no idea how to protect either of them from the possibility that love wasn't always enough to keep the shape of a thing from changing. The fight happened on a Sunday. Not the low-grade tension of the previous weeks. A real one. The kind that starts small and reveals in the first 3 exchanges that it's actually about everything that has been accumulating for months. It started because Ryan said again too quickly and too carefully that Claire should take the Paris residency, that it was the right move, that he and Lily would figure it out. And Claire, who had been watching him pre-process the loss of her for 3 weeks, finally stopped being patient about it. Stop, she said. Stop handing me my coat. I'm not, you are. Every time we get close to the actual decision, you hand me my coat and point at the door. Her voice was controlled, but there was an edge to it now that he hadn't heard before. You've been doing it since the night I told you. Every conversation, every time we get close to talking about what we actually want, you redirect to what I deserve. What the right move is for my career. What a good man would do. She stopped. You know what a good man would do? He'd tell me the truth. I've told you the truth. I don't want you to go. And then immediately tell me to go anyway, which sends a very clear message, Ryan. You know what it says? He didn't answer. It says you're already halfway gone, she said. It says you've decided the ending, and now you're just managing the timeline. She put her hands flat on the counter. I can't fight for something if you've already surrendered it. I'm not surrendering. I'm trying to not be the man who holds you back. There's a difference between holding someone back and wanting them to stay. Do you understand that? Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, and she steadied it immediately, which somehow made it worse. I am not asking you to cage me. I am asking you to want me. Out loud. Without the caveat. Without the immediate redirect to what's noble and self-sacrificing. She looked at him. Just want me to stay. Say it, once, without handing me my coat at the end. The room was completely still. Ryan looked at her across the kitchen. And then something happened that he would think about for a very long time afterward. In the moment when he should have said it, when everything was open and the words were right there, the old reflex took over. The one built from 5 years of bracing, of getting ahead of loss, of protecting himself by pretending he didn't need protection. He said, You should take the residency, Claire. It's what's right. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her jacket from the back of the chair, put it on, picked up her camera bag. Okay, she said, very quietly. Okay. She walked to the door. Ryan didn't move. She opened it, paused with her hand on the frame. I told Lily I wasn't going anywhere, she said without turning around. I meant that. But you... She stopped. You have to decide if you're brave enough to mean it too. And then the door closed, and the apartment was silent, in a way it hadn't been since Emily died. Ryan stood in the kitchen for a long time, and understood finally, with the complete clarity that only comes after something breaks, that the person he'd been most afraid of losing was not Emily. It was himself. The version of himself that was capable of choosing fully without the exit strategy already built in. He'd lost that man somewhere between the hospital and the 5 years after it, and he had no idea if he could find his way back. The first 3 days after Claire walked out, Ryan functioned. That was the only word for it. He got up. He made Lily's lunch. He drove her to school. He went to the base. He ran his drills, filed his reports, answered questions from junior officers in the specific measured tone of a man who had everything under control. He ate. He slept in 2-hour increments. He functioned. Lily didn't ask about Claire directly for the first 2 days, which told him she understood more than he'd given her credit for. On the third morning, while he was making eggs she didn't want, she sat at the counter and said, without looking up from the table, "Did you mess it up?" Ryan cracked an egg against the pan. "What makes you ask that?" "Because she's not here, and you look like you did when you came home from the long deployment. Like someone who's been away from the thing that matters and doesn't know how to get back." He set down the spatula, turned around. "Yeah," he said. "I messed it up." Lily nodded slowly like she'd already known and had only asked to confirm. "How bad?" "Pretty bad." "Can you fix it?" He looked at his daughter, 8 years old, sitting at his kitchen counter at 7 in the morning, with her hair still half undone, asking him the most important question he'd been asked in years, with the directness of someone who hadn't learned yet to be indirect about things that mattered. "I don't know," he said honestly. Lily picked up her fork. "You should find out," she said, "because she's the best thing that happened to us since in a long time. And you know that, and I think she knows that. And the only person who's pretending not to know that is you." She ate her eggs. Ryan stood at the stove and had the experience not for the first time of being parented by his 8-year-old. He didn't call Claire. Not because he didn't want to. He wanted to constantly with a persistence that surprised him, given that he'd spent years becoming someone who needed very little. He didn't call because he understood for the first time with real clarity that calling wasn't the thing. Calling was what he would have done before the reaching out without the internal change, the gesture without the work behind it. Claire had not left because he failed to call. She'd left because he'd built a door with no handle on the inside, and she'd finally stopped trying to push it open from her side. So instead of calling, he sat with it. He sat with it at 5 in the morning when the apartment was quiet, and Lily was asleep, and there was nothing between him and his own thinking. He sat with it on the base during the 15-minute gaps between obligations, when his body was still, and his mind, released from the discipline of task, went immediately to the place it had been avoiding for 5 years. He sat with the fact that he had loved Emily and lost her, and the losing had not been something he survived so much as something he'd built a structure around, a way of living that looked like healing from the outside, and was actually just very well-organized avoidance from the inside. He'd been so focused on not losing again that he'd never asked himself what it would cost to never fully hold anything again. It would cost exactly this, it turned out. On the 4th day, he drove to the cemetery. He hadn't been in 8 months. He always told himself he'd go more, and then the months would pass the way months do when you're keeping a child alive, and keeping a career alive, and keeping yourself functional, and the visits would space out further than he intended. He stood at Emily's grave with his hands in his jacket pockets and felt the cold of the morning through his boots. He didn't have a speech prepared. He'd never talked to the grave the way some people did the long, fluid conversations he'd heard others describe. It had always felt performative to him talking to stone. But today he had one thing to say, and he said it. "I think I've been using you as a reason," he said. Not your memory, not loving you, but the losing you. I think I've been using the losing you as a reason to not be all the way in anything." He stopped. The wind moved. "That's not fair to you. You didn't leave. You didn't choose to go. And I've been treating it like you did. Like love is something that betrays you, like it's a liability. He was quiet for a moment. She's not you. She doesn't try to be. But she's Emily. She's real, and she's good, and she chose us. And I stood in the kitchen and handed her her coat because I was scared, and I think you'd have something to say about that. He stood there for another few minutes, then he walked back to his car. He didn't feel better exactly. He felt clearer, which was different and actually more useful. Yeah. He called his commanding officer that afternoon and requested a personal day for the following Friday. Then he called the school and arranged for Lily to go home with her friend Nadia after dismissal. Then he sat down at his kitchen table with a legal pad and wrote down by hand the things he knew to be true. He knew he loved Claire. That was no longer a question or a feeling he was monitoring from a distance. It was just a fact as structural as anything else in his life. He knew Lily loved her. He knew Claire loved them both, and that the loving had cost her something too, that she hadn't walked into this casually. He knew that Paris was real and legitimate, and deserved that it wasn't a threat to what they'd built, but a part of who she was, and you didn't love someone by asking them to hollow out the parts of themselves that were there before you arrived. And he knew this was the one that had taken him the longest to get to, that the version of himself who kept one foot out the door at all times was not protecting anyone. It was not protecting Lily, who deserved a father who modeled what it looked like to stay in something hard. It was not protecting Claire, who had asked directly and without ambiguity to be wanted, without the exit strategy attached. And it was not protecting him. It was just costing him steadily everything that mattered. He looked at what he'd written for a long time. Then he picked up the phone. Not to call Claire, not yet. He called his buddy Daniel, who'd been in his unit for 6 years, and was the only person Ryan trusted with anything that wasn't operationally necessary. "I need to talk," Ryan said. A pause. "You never say that." "I know." "That bad?" "I let her walk out." Another pause. "I'll come over." Daniel was there in 40 minutes, which told Ryan everything about what kind of friend he was. He sat at Ryan's kitchen table with a cup of coffee and listened without interrupting, which was also a thing Ryan valued more than he'd ever said out loud. He listened to the whole thing Christmas Eve the diner, Claire Lily's question about whether Claire was going to stay Paris the Sunday when he'd handed Claire her coat one too many times. When Ryan was done, Daniel said, "Can I ask you something without you getting defensive?" "Probably not. Ask anyway." "Why do you think you deserve to lose her?" Ryan looked at him. "That's not what I think." "That's what the behavior says. The pre-processing, the getting ahead of the loss. That's a man who thinks the ending is already written, and he's just managing the timeline until it arrives." Daniel set his cup down. "Why do you think the ending is written?" Ryan didn't answer for a moment. "Because it was written before," he said. "Once. Once was enough to—" "Ryan," Daniel's voice was level. "Emily got a cardiac arrhythmia at 26 years old. That's not a pattern. That's not evidence that love ends. That's a 26-year-old woman getting a cardiac arrhythmia." He paused. "You've been treating it like data, like proof of something. It's not proof of anything except that you had terrible, undeserved bad luck, and you need to stop making that loss pay for something it didn't do." The kitchen was very quiet. "She asked me to want her to stay," Ryan said, out loud, without the caveat. "Did you do it?" "No." "Why?" "Because the second I do it without the caveat, I'm all the way in." "And all the way in means—" "Means what?" "That you love her. You already love her. You told me that 4 months ago, and you didn't even realize you were saying it." Daniel looked at him steadily. "Being all the way in just means being honest about where you already are." He paused. "You've been standing in water up to your neck for months telling yourself you haven't committed to swimming." Ryan sat with that for a long time. "What do I do?" he said. It came out simpler and more direct than he intended, which meant it was the real question. "You go tell her the truth," Daniel said. "Not the managed version, the actual one. And you figure out Paris together like two adults who love each other instead of making the decision by default because you were too scared to have the conversation." He found her on a Tuesday. He knew she photographed the farmer's market on Tuesdays she'd mentioned it months ago, The light in the morning, the specific quality of it. He knew which market. He drove there without texting first because he understood that a text gave her the option of a controlled response, and what he needed was an actual conversation with no exits pre-built in. She was near the flower stalls when he spotted her. Camera up, moving around a woman arranging dahlias, looking for the angle the way she always did, with her whole body, not just her eyes. She lowered the camera and turned and saw him. She didn't move. He walked to her. "I'm not handing you your coat," he said. "I'm not telling you to go. I'm not processing the ending or managing the timeline or any of the other things I've been doing for 5 years to avoid feeling the full weight of something." He stopped in front of her. "I love you. I love you without the caveat. And I don't want you to go to Paris. I want you to stay. I want you to be here with us in a way that's real and named and not perpetually provisional." He paused. "That's the truth. That's the actual truth without the coat attached." Claire looked at him. "That's not all of the truth," she said. "Because Paris is still real. The residency is still there. You can love me and want me to stay, and that still doesn't solve the thing." "I know. That's why I want to talk about it instead of solving it for you." He held her gaze. "Tell me what you want. Not what you've decided. What you actually want." She was quiet for a long moment. A vendor called out behind them. Someone walked between them with a bag of produce. Neither of them moved. "I want both," she said finally. "I want the residency, and I want you and Lily. And I've been spending 3 weeks telling myself I can't have both, because wanting both is greedy, and one of them has to give, and the one that should give is the selfish one. And then I can't figure out which one is the selfish one." "Neither of them is selfish," Ryan said. "You're allowed to want your work and your family. Those things aren't enemies." She looked at him when he said the word family. He let her look. "The program is 6 months," she said slowly. "But I asked them last week, hypothetically, whether the residency could be structured differently, split into segments." She watched his face. "They said they've done it before for fellows with complex situations, 2 periods of 3 months each with time at home between." Ryan absorbed that. "When did you ask?" "4 days after our fight." "So you were all ready." "I was already trying to find the answer," she said. "I just needed to know if you were trying to find it too, or if you'd already handed me my coat and were just waiting for me to finish putting it on." He reached out and took her hand. She let him. "I'm not handing you anything," he said. "I'm done with that." She looked down at their hands, then up at him. 3 months there come home, 3 months there again. That's the structure they offered. Lily and I can work with that. You'd have to actually tell her, not manage it. Actually explain it and let her be upset about it, and then watch her be okay. "I know." He tightened his hand slightly. "I know how to be honest with my daughter. I just forgot for a while how to be honest with myself." Claire breathed out. Not a sigh more, like something releasing. Like a thing that had been held under pressure finally returning to its natural shape. "I'm still angry with you," she said. "I know. Not about Paris. About the coat thing. About the weeks of watching you put me at arm's length while I was standing right there trying to reach you. You should be angry about that. It was real, and it cost you, and I'm sorry." He said it directly without the qualifications he'd have reached for before. Not sorry, but just sorry. She looked at him for a long moment. "Okay," she said. "Okay meaning you forgive me, or okay meaning you hear me?" "Both," she said. "But the forgiving part is going to take a little while." "Take whatever time it takes," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." She looked at him when he said it really looked the way she'd looked at him that first night in the diner, like she was filing something away for later, checking whether it was real. "Come to dinner Sunday," he said. "I'll tell Lily about the plan. All of it real and honest. And then we can figure it out together." He paused. "Like a family." Claire was quiet for a moment. "Okay," she said. And this time, the word carried everything. Sunday dinner was not a perfect conversation. Lily listened to the whole thing with the focused attention she brought to things that mattered. The plan, the structure, the 3 months and 3 months, the part about Paris being something important that Claire had worked hard for and deserved to pursue. She asked 3 questions, each of which was better than the last. The first, "So she comes back in between?" "Yes," Ryan said. "She comes back in between." The second, "And it's not like the Navy where you don't know how long?" "No," Claire said. "I know exactly how long, and I'll know exactly when I'm coming home." Lily processed that. Then, "Can I write you letters, real ones, with stamps?" Claire's expression did the thing it did, sometimes the thing that moved across her face before she could stop it. The thing that Ryan had come to understand meant she was feeling something she hadn't budgeted for. "I would like nothing more in the world," she said. Lily nodded, satisfied in the way she got when a reasonable arrangement had been reached. Then she picked up her fork and said, "Dad, you should probably do something about this. Like officially. Before she leaves." Ryan looked at her. "Do something about what exactly?" Lily looked at him with the expression of a child explaining something to an adult who is being deliberately obtuse. "About the situation," she said. "The whole thing. All of it. You know what I mean." Ryan looked at Claire. Claire was looking at Lily with something that was not quite a smile, but was the thing that lived just before a smile. "We'll figure it out," Ryan said. "You always say that," Lily said. "And so far, I've always been right." Lily considered this. "Fair," she said, and went back to her dinner. Ryan and Claire looked at each other across the table. Not everything was solved. Paris was still coming. The hard nights were still ahead. The logistics were still real, and the distance was still real, and the fear, his fear, her fear, Lily's fear, was not gone. It had just been reframed into something they were now carrying together instead of separately. But something fundamental had shifted in the last week. Something in Ryan himself, in the man he'd been before Emily died, and had spent 5 years reconstructing into someone more cautious, more defended, more careful about what he let himself need. He was done being careful in that particular way. He was done building the exit before he'd fully walked through the door. He was all the way in, and sitting at his kitchen table on a Sunday evening with Claire across from him and Lily between them, he finally understood what that felt like. It felt like being afraid and staying anyway. It felt, in other words, exactly like love. September came, the way it always does, without asking permission, without concern for whether anyone was ready. Claire's flight was on a Thursday. Ryan and Lily drove her to the airport together, which had been Lily's specific and non-negotiable request from the moment the date was confirmed. She'd spent the previous week writing 4 letters in advance, actual letters on actual paper, with her best handwriting and hand-drawn stamps in the corners, because she'd decided the real stamps weren't decorative enough. She handed them to Claire at the departure gate in a sealed envelope with "Do not open until you miss us" written across the front in red marker. Claire held the envelope against her chest for a moment with her eyes closed. Then she crouched down and held Lily for a long time. Ryan watched them from 3 feet away and didn't try to manage what he was feeling. He'd been practicing that letting things be what they were without immediately building a structure around them. It was harder than any physical training he'd ever done, and he was not yet good at it, but he was better than he'd been in June, which was better than he'd been in January, which was better than he'd been in the diner on Christmas Eve, when he'd torn a photograph in half and decided he was done. Progress, it turned out, didn't look like arrival. It looked like slightly less distance from where you needed to be. Claire stood up and looked at him. 3 months, she said. 3 months, he said back. You're going to be fine. I know. Lily's going to be fine. I know that too. She stepped closer and put her hand flat against his chest for a moment. Not a hug, something more direct than that, like she was checking that his heart was still doing what hearts were supposed to do. Don't pack me up while I'm gone, she said quietly. Don't do the thing where you process the ending, and it's already half over by the time I get back. I won't. Promise me. He covered her hand with his. I promise. She nodded, picked up her camera bag, looked at both of them one more time, the long, specific look of a photographer committing something to memory because she knows the light is about to change. Then she walked through the gate. Lily slid her hand into Ryan's without a word. He held it. They stood there until they couldn't see her anymore. Then they stood there a little longer. Okay, Lily said finally. Okay, Ryan said. They drove home, made dinner, did the dishes. Lily went to bed, and Ryan sat on the couch in the specific quiet of an apartment that was missing a presence it had gotten used to, and he did not pre-process the ending. He sat with the missing and let it be what it was. Not a loss, not a warning, just the particular ache of caring about someone who was somewhere else. The price of admission to loving people who had their own lives. The cost he'd been refusing to pay for 5 years and was now paying deliberately with full awareness, because the alternative was standing in the shallows for the rest of his life and calling it safety. He picked up his phone. Texted Claire. She's asleep. The apartment is quiet. I'm not packing you up. The reply came 20 minutes later. She was already at the gate waiting for her connection. Good. I'll call when I land. Tell Lily I opened the first letter already. I know. I couldn't wait. Ryan smiled at his phone. Then he went to bed, and slept better than he had in months. 10. The 3 months had a shape to them that he hadn't anticipated. He'd expected absence, the flat gray quality of waiting. What he got instead was something more textured. Claire called every other day, sometimes more. Not long calls, always sometimes, just 15 minutes between her sessions. Her voice tired and alive at the same time, telling him about the light on the Seine in late afternoon, or about the elderly Algerian woman who'd let her photograph her kitchen window every morning for 2 weeks, because, as the woman explained through a translator, she had the eyes of someone who understood what things meant. Ryan would tell her about Lily's latest project, a detailed illustrated encyclopedia of every dog breed she'd ever seen organized by neighborhood, or about something that had happened on the base, or about the dinner he'd burned because he'd been on the phone with Daniel and forgotten the stove. Lily wrote her letters. All 4 of the pre-written ones went in the first month, and then she kept going, keeping a running correspondence with a discipline that Ryan suspected was better than his own paperwork record. Claire wrote back real letters sent from Paris with French stamps that Lily added to a collection she'd started specifically for this purpose. On a Thursday night in October, Lily read him one of Claire's letters at dinner. Dear Lily, today I photographed a man who sells flowers outside the Musée d'Orsay. He's been there for 31 years. He told me he stays because the people who walk past his cart have just seen beautiful things, and their faces are open in a way that faces usually aren't. He said open faces are the best things in the world to be near. I thought about you when he said that. You have that. You were born with it. Don't let anyone talk you out of it. Lily put the letter down and looked at Ryan. She's really good at knowing things, Lily said. Yeah, Ryan said. She is. Are you going to do something about it? Still. Like I said. Ryan had been waiting for this question to resurface. Lily had a long memory, and the patience of someone who understood that the important things took time but did not take forever. I'm working on it, he said. Lily studied him. How close are you? Getting there. Dad? Lily, I'm just saying, she said carefully, with the diplomacy of a child who had learned to make her point without technically issuing an ultimatum, that when she comes home, it would be nice if things were decided. You know, like official. So she knows the answer before she has to wonder about it. Ryan looked at his daughter across the dinner table. When did you get so smart? He said. I've always been this smart, Lily said. You're just finally listening. He bought the ring on a Wednesday in November. Not Emily's ring. He'd put that one away. Not discarded, never discarded. It would go to Lily someday when she was old enough to carry it, but put away properly in the small wooden box in the back of his closet that held the things too important to display and too important to lose. Emily's ring belonged to that category. It was complete. It was what it had been. And what he needed now was something new. Something chosen forward, not backward. The jeweler was a small shop on Sacramento Street that Daniel's wife had recommended with the particular confidence of someone who had been correctly recommended things her whole life. Ryan went on his lunch break and spent 45 minutes looking at things he couldn't quite name the criteria for. And then a woman behind the counter put a ring in front of him that was simple and specific. A narrow band with a single stone, not large, not performative, just exact. And he knew immediately. Not because it was perfect, because it was honest. It looked like something you'd choose for a person you actually knew, rather than an impression you were trying to make. He bought it, put it in his jacket pocket, drove back to the base, ran drills in the afternoon with the ring in his pocket, and thought about nothing except what he was going to say. Not a speech. He wasn't a speech man. But the real thing, the true thing, the words that were actually inside him without the management and the processing and the pre-built exits. He knew what he wanted to say. He just needed her to come home first. Claire's flight landed on a Friday afternoon in late November, 2 weeks before December. 2 weeks before the anniversary of the night, they'd met a timing that Ryan had not planned, but that felt in the way that real things sometimes do, like the story was writing itself toward something. She came through arrivals looking like someone who had been working hard and was tired in the way that only satisfying work makes you tired. Not depleted, just used. Her camera bag was more battered than when she'd left. She had a new scar on her left hand from a tripod incident she'd described in a call with an amount of equanimity that had made Ryan simultaneously admire her and want to fly to Paris and wrap her hand for her. Lily spotted her first and was moving before Ryan could say anything, crossing the arrivals hall at a dead run, which was technically against the airport's moving walkway policy or some such thing. And Ryan didn't say a word about it. Claire dropped her camera bag and caught Lily mid-flight, the two of them colliding with the specific force of people who had been waiting a long time to be in the same place again. Ryan picked up the camera bag from the floor, walked over, waited. Lily eventually released her, and Claire looked up at Ryan over Lily's head. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he said. She stood up, looked at him. The whole assessment, the gray-green eyes that noticed everything. The look he'd first seen across a diner table on Christmas Eve when she'd decided to sit down without asking permission. "You look different," she said. "Good different or complicated different?" She smiled. "Same thing." He took her carry-on. She took her camera bag back. Lily took Claire's free hand, and the three of them walked out of the airport together into the cold November afternoon. He almost did it that night. They had dinner at the apartment, nothing planned, just the food that was in the house. Lily insisting on making something herself, which resulted in pasta with what she described as an experimental sauce that was tomato-based and also involved an amount of cheddar cheese that Ryan chose not to question. Claire ate 2 full servings and called it the best thing she'd had in 3 months, which was a generous overstatement that Lily accepted completely and filed away for the rest of her life. After Lily was in bed, Ryan and Claire sat on the couch, the way they'd sat before Paris, her feet tucked under her, his arm around her. The city outside, doing what the city did. She told him more about the work, the people she'd photographed, the project she was building toward a long-form documentary series about ordinary people in extraordinary moments of dailiness. The flower vendor, the woman with the kitchen window, a teenage boy she'd found playing violin in a metro station every morning from 6 to 8 before school. The series had a name now. She'd thought of it in the 2nd month. "What's it called?" Ryan asked. "The People Who Stay," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "That's the title?" "That's the title." She tilted her head to look up at him. "People who stay in the same place their whole lives. People who stay committed to the same work. People who stay when leaving would be easier." She paused. "I had a lot of time to think about what that means." Ryan looked down at her. He almost did it right then. The ring was in his jacket pocket, which was hanging by the door. He'd been carrying it for 2 weeks, which Daniel said was either romantic or absurd, and possibly both. But something told him to wait. Not fear, not management, just the sense that the moment, while good, was not yet the exact moment, that there was a specific moment coming that he would know when it arrived. He trusted that. He was learning to trust that. "I'm glad you're home," he said instead. She put her head back on his shoulder. "Me too." The specific moment arrived as specific moments do, without announcement. It was Christmas Eve, not planned or not entirely. Ryan had suggested the diner as a kind of private joke between them, a year anniversary thing, and Claire had agreed with the particular smile she had for things that were simultaneously sentimental and absurd. Lily had been invited because Lily had made it emphatically clear that she was not staying home with Mrs. Patterson on Christmas Eve, and honestly, Ryan had never seriously considered leaving her behind. It was the three of them, or it was nothing, which was the only way things had ever really made sense. The diner was exactly the same. The Christmas lights on the front window blinking unevenly. Ryan noticed immediately that the same bulb from last year seemed to still be almost dead, but refusing to give up. The smell of cinnamon and burnt toast. The particular quality of light that came from too many holiday decorations and too few overhead fixtures. They got the same booth. Ryan didn't request it. It was just the one that was open. They ordered. Terrible coffee for Ryan and Claire, hot chocolate for Lily. The rain came down outside, of course it did, because apparently this diner existed in its own weather system. A family hurried past under a single umbrella, the father getting soaked, laughing about it. Ryan watched them, and this time didn't look away. They talked about the year, about Paris and the letters and Lily's dog encyclopedia, which had reached 47 breeds and shown no signs of stopping. About Ryan's upcoming assignment and how they'd handle it. About Christmas plans and whose traditions to keep, and whether Claire's tradition of oysters on Christmas morning was something the Cole household was ready to adopt, which Lily said absolutely not to, with a firmness that closed the subject. And then Lily, who had been unusually quiet for the last 20 minutes, in the particular way of a child who is thinking about something large, looked up from her hot chocolate and said with complete innocence and no apparent awareness of the bomb she was dropping, "Dad, if she's already family, why haven't you married her yet?" The diner didn't stop, but the immediate vicinity of their booth went very still. Claire made a sound that started as a laugh and converted under pressure into something involving tears. Ryan felt the ring in his jacket pocket. He'd put it there before they left the apartment. He hadn't known exactly why. Now he did. From the booth directly behind them, a voice. An elderly woman's voice, clear and unhurried, belonging to someone who had been sitting quietly through her own Christmas Eve and had heard what Lily said the way you hear something when you weren't listening, but the words were meant to carry. "Son." Ryan turned. She was perhaps 75. White hair pinned neatly a winter coat, still buttoned a cup of tea she'd clearly been nursing for some time. She had the look of a woman who had lived long enough to say the true thing without embarrassment. She pointed at him, not unkindly, the way you point at someone when you want them to understand that you're speaking specifically to them and not to the room. "Marry her," she said. Just that. The table next to her heard. Then the booth across. Then, in the way that things travel in small diners on Christmas Eve, the whole room was paying attention without quite knowing why. Ryan turned back. Claire was looking at him. Not performing. Just looking open-faced, the way the flower vendor had described the way she'd been when she'd first sat down across from him a year ago and said the thing that started all of this. Lily was already nodding. Slowly, decisively, like a person ratifying a decision that has already been made. Ryan reached into his jacket pocket. He didn't have a speech. He'd known for weeks he wasn't going to have a speech. What he had was the truth, which he'd been learning slowly and imperfectly to say out loud without the exit strategy attached. He put the ring on the table between them. "I spent 5 years," he said, "building a life that was safe, that couldn't lose anything because it wouldn't let anything all the way in. And then you sat down across from me in this booth without asking permission, and said something I hadn't heard in so long I'd forgotten it was something I needed to hear." He stopped. "I'm not afraid of losing you anymore. I am. I'll probably always be a little. But I'm more afraid of standing in the doorway for the rest of my life than I am of walking through it." He met her eyes. "You're my family, Claire. You and Lily and whatever this is that we've built, you're it. And I want to stop being provisional about it." He picked up the ring. "Will you marry me?" The diner was completely silent. Claire was crying in the way she'd cried in Paris when she'd looked at the photograph of Lily's first letter fully, without managing it, without any of the composure she usually kept carefully in place. Lily reached across the table and put her small hand on top of Claire's. "Just say yes," she said. He practiced. The diner burst. Not politely. Not the restrained murmur of strangers trying to be respectful. actually burst laughter and applause, and somebody near the counter saying, "Oh, thank God," like they'd been personally invested in the outcome. The elderly woman in the booth behind them pressed her hand to her chest and smiled in the way of someone who has seen enough of life to know that moments like this one are not small. Claire looked at Ryan through her tears. "Yes," she said. "Obviously, yes. You absolute—" She laughed. "Yes." He put the ring on her finger. His hands were not entirely steady, which he didn't try to hide. Lily climbed across the booth and inserted herself between them with the force and precision of someone who had been waiting a year for this exact moment and was not going to be a bystander in it. "I told you," she said to no one in particular and everyone in general. "I told him." A year ago, on this night, Ryan Cole had sat in this booth alone, a torn photograph in his pocket, and a cold cup of coffee going nowhere, and decided he was done. Done trying. Done believing the attempt was worth what it cost. He'd been wrong about that. Not dramatically wrong, not in the way of a man who never understood anything. In the way of a man who was tired and hurt, and had excellent reasons for the conclusions he'd reached, and who needed one person to sit down across from him without asking permission, and refused to let the conclusion stand. Love, he understood now, was not the thing that happened to you. It was not lightning or luck or the right person appearing at the right time. Those things were the beginning, the door opening. What love actually was in the long and unglamorous and irreplaceable substance of it was the choosing that happened after. Every day, in the small decisions, in the moments when leaving would be easier and staying cost something real. It was Claire writing letters from Paris. It was Lily crossing an airport arrivals hall at a dead run. It was Ryan Cole putting down the exit strategy and picking up the ring. It was showing up. It was staying. Not because the fear was gone, not because the guarantee existed, but because the people across the table were worth every uncertain, unguaranteed, wide-open day of it. Outside the diner, the rain came down. The Christmas lights blinked that same half-dead bulb, still holding on, still refusing to go dark. A family hurried past under a shared umbrella. Inside, in a corner booth that smelled like cinnamon and burnt toast, a man and a woman and a little girl who had each in their own way learned the cost of running, sat together in the warmth of a thing they had all chosen, and stayed.